Character design, just like story, requires a hook, something that grabs the reader's attention. Today, we'll look at that more in depth. Hello, welcome to Unit 3 in Section 2. I'm Christopher Eplin, your course instructor. I'm so glad that you have participated with this course so far. And in this particular unit, we're delving more into what I think is my most fun part of creating a story, and that's character design. Now, I want to be real clear on something. Whether you're working on a standalone piece of art or you're working on sequential pieces that go together to form a narrative, your character design is important. If you don't have a character in your overall aspect of your story or construction, then take this as just a learning experience in terms of future creations or stories you may work on. But there's aspects of this that do apply whether you have a character in your overall standalone piece or you don't. Because design, planning ahead, all of these things are so important with art and graphic design. You do not ever sit down on your own by yourself and put together a completed work of art just as is. There's planning involved. Even artists that may sit down and maybe not have a mock-up design or a study done of their work, and let's say they sit down and start creating, they're creating from something. There's a purpose, there's a plan in head, and sometimes artists will allow art to form itself and create itself, but we in this course are dealing with specific parameters on how to work in. So we give you the tools you need to be able to maybe one day sit down and do that. Now, characters within a story are vital. Characters drive the narrative, the plot. Characters hold the reader's or the viewer's attention. So for sequential pieces of art, that means multiple images, multiple pieces of work together that tell a story. Characters actually change and evolve throughout that aspect from the beginning to the end. They may look the same, but the plot drives and changes characters in a certain way. Now, for character design, it's really simple in terms of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be looking at the characters in your story. We're going to be listing aspects and attributes about them. And we're going to be diving more into looking at each individual character in terms of how that character is going to appear to the reader or the viewer. This is so vital. Breaking down a character from what other artists have created already is another important aspect of this unit. We're going to be looking at other existing characters in mediums and different stories today. We're going to break those down and ask those questions we've been asking all along. Why did the artist choose to do that? And what did they want to maybe convey or get across to the reader or the viewer by doing so? These are questions you should be asking yourself. Believe me, it matters if your character is drawn in a certain way or painted in a certain way. It gives effects to the overall emotion and the overall feeling for your story. So just sit back, relax, let's have fun, and we're going to dive more into character design. Now often when I'm creating my own characters, I use a method called the circle method. You can see that I'm using a red pencil first to lay down just a series of circles. And what these series of circles represent are aspects of the character's body. So if you've ever seen those little wooden figurines that you could purchase that will you could bend in certain directions and well, this is really something similar to that, what I'm doing. I use ovals and circles to help build the anatomy of the character. So for instance, in this particular drawing, I'm laying out these circles and in proportion of what I want the character to look like. Okay, well, now often when I'm creating my own characters, I use a method called the circle method. And you can see that I'm using a red pencil first to lay down just a series of circles. And what these series of circles represent are aspects of the character's body. So if you've ever seen those little wooden um, figurines that you could purchase that will you can bend in certain directions, and so well, this is really something similar to that. What I'm doing, I use ovals and circles to help build the anatomy of the character. So for instance, in this particular drawing, I'm laying out these circles and in proportion of what I want the character to look like. Go back over after I finished in red, and I may then sketch out where I want my line to actually be and the features that I want to keep and get rid of. So some of these features I may get rid of, some I'll keep. So you'll see here that I'm adding this detail in now. So we got this little fat cat character who's just sitting back on a ledge, and that's what I want to try to convey is this sense of this character sitting back on this ledge. So my ovals just help to guide me. The ovals help to show me where my lines will be, so that whenever I go in to work in pencil or ink, I can easily know where my lines are. So this is just a small example of that. So you can imagine this character sitting on this ledge, and this is where the character exists in the story. So that's what I'm going to use. The character has characteristics: purple prickles, we have orange eyes, poisonous wart, terrible teeth with black tongue, terrible jaws, knobby knees, and claws. So these are all features of the character. The artist has chose to label these so that we know, or we could tell anyway, what's happening in each one of these features of this artist's work. So we know what's happening. We know what's going on with this character, and maybe perhaps why the character chose to do this. So it's called the Gruffalo. Now we have a description of the character. So let's read it together. So the Gruffalo has two large curved horns at the top of his head. Now imagine you're not seeing the character at this point. This is just a description. He has a bright orange eyes, slimy black tongue. The Gruffalo has an enormous poisonous wart on the end of his nose. Running all down his back are sharp pointed prickles. His claws are as sharp as razors, but his teeth are blunt and brittle. His fur feels as soft as a cotton wool, but it's matted and mangled. He has knobby knees and turned out toes. His feet are gigantic and stumps through the forest while swishing his long, bushy tail. The animals are scared of him because he is so terrifyingly large. Now, if we were to pull out just the descriptive words from this and apply it to the character, we can see how the character ends up being this. The character, the author or the illustrator has clearly labeled all of the characteristics of this creation of this character. So we know after reading this what it should look like. So here's an example for Shrek. So if you were to take all of your characters in your story and you were to lay those out in terms of literally from beginning to end, what I mean by that is you have your story here. So just pretend with me this is a piece of paper that you've written out your concept for your standalone piece, what we had in the first section for you to do, or you have your story. Then you start to pull out, and literally you should do this. This is what everyone should do. Pull out of your story. This is your story over here. Start pulling out all of the characters. Okay, so if you have a character named Moby, write that out to the side. I have a character named Alice. I have a character named Doug. I have a character named Tim. And I have a character named Spot. Okay, so those are my characters in my story. Now what I want to do, and what I should do, is go ahead and start describing those characters off on a different sheet of paper. So maybe Moby might be short. Okay, it's a person, it's a boy. Age, let's say 12. Let's say has brown hair. Okay, angry. red shirt, blue pants. So we start describing our character. The more descriptive words you have for a character, the more accessible that character is going to be to you. So when you start to draw that character later on, when you start to actually draw out this character, you're going to know automatically what the character looks like. You're going to know ahead of time how the character should be depicted. So it's easier for you, the creator, the artist now, to start to pull these things together and put those into some sort of an image that we can see, so that we can see your intentions for your character start to play out right in front of us now on paper. So that's the goal. So Moby becomes almost like a living, real creation of yours, and that's what we want. So let's look at Shrek. Now, Shrek is a protagonist. The antagonist of the story is Lord Farquaad. I guess that's how you pronounce that. I forgot. It's been a while. Stands in his way, kills ogres, tries to keep Shrek and Fauna apart. Shrek is a dynamic character because he changes throughout the story. He becomes softer and lets people to his life. Shrek is round because we see his strengths and weaknesses. He seems like a real person. Now, these are all descriptive words describing Shrek, but what we're lacking in this are real characteristics of Shrek. So what I mean by that is that we need to have more descriptive words. So if I could pull this back for a second, we can see what I mean by this. So for Shrek, we need to say he's green, he's big, he's large hands, he has pointy antlers or ears, I should say, wide mouth, big nose, large eyes. He's an ogre, so he has big feet. He wears some sort of a skinned vest and a cloth for a shirt. He's got maybe a leather belt that's brown. The vest is brown. The shirt is dirty, white. He also has leggings that he wears that are brown. These are all more descriptive words that deal with the appearance of Shrek, not just how he appears in the story. But both these things are important when describing your character. Now here we have something that's been pulled from a description of a character for film, but it relates to what we're trying to do here too. Even if you're doing a standalone piece and you have a character in that painting, you should be able to describe what that character looks like before you start. So let's say if someone's getting ready to look at your final work and they were to say, okay, describe this for me, then you should be able to describe to that person, the viewer, what your final piece is about by your descriptive words of your characters. If you do not have any characters in your standalone piece, like I said at the beginning of the video, take what you can from this because this is important for creating any type of visual narrative. Okay, so let's read this description of John Batraine. John Batraine is the protagonist of the film. Now, like I said, it's for film. Let's just imagine this for a sequential art piece. Age 21. Now, why would we want to know his age? Well, his age tells us a lot about how he looks. If you imagine in your head a 21-year-old, just any average 21-year-old, and then you imagine in your mind also a 82-year-old, you can see how that works out. Batraine has a hardened expression and solemn demeanor with black frizzy hair that has grown since his leave from service. Now we're seeing bits of the story to pop out here. We have the word service, so we know he was in some sort of military service. We may learn more as we go on. Batraine has served 2 tours for the British military, posted in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, where he was awarded the Military Cross for Outstanding Service. Now that's important. It's a part of the story. It doesn't necessarily tell us the descriptive words of what he looks like, but this helps us in understanding maybe a little bit about the character and how they should be portrayed. So he's had time in the service, and so we imagine him not to be, let's say, someone versus someone, let's say, that plays, and this is no hit against any gamers out there, but you think of a military person, someone that served in the military versus someone that maybe plays Call of Duty all day, and you can imagine the differences there. So let's go on and read more about John Batraine. He was awarded the Military Cross for Outstanding Service During his tour, his fellow comrade and best friend, Lieutenant Sam Dawes, was killed by an IED explosion, which has resulted in Betrain contracting post-traumatic stress disorder and thus being sent back to England to receive treatment. Now, why is that important? Well, that leads to maybe how we depict certain elements of the story when it happens. So if we show John Betrain during service, during maybe combat, he may have a different appearance to the emotional, how we draw the emotions in his face, versus now having been sent back to the States, or not the States, but to Britain, where he's receiving treatment for this disorder. Since his death, Betrain has become withdrawn and haunted, regularly suffering from flashbacks, hallucinations, and he has struggled to cope with the dramatic events of his tour. Betrain is regularly on edge and continues to live as he is still in Afghanistan, regularly running to maintain his fitness. So here we have another important glimpse into this character. Even though these aren't descriptive words of how the character appears, we do have some telltale signs on how we should depict the character in the portion where it mentions that he has flashbacks and hallucinations. Now imagine in your mind a 21-year-old man who is serving in the military and is actually in war, and how they may look, versus a man who's 21-year-old, has served in the military, and is back home in a hospital suffering from hallucinations and flashbacks. How we depict those two characters is totally different. We got a description of Lenny. Those of you who are Simpsons fans may recognize him. Let's read what this says. He is a medium height and thin. His skin is yellow. He's got medium length, wavy, light brown hair. His eyes are big and black. He's got a long nose, small ears, and no eyebrows. He is wearing a green shirt, purple straps, gray trousers, and black shoes. This is the exact, to the point, descriptive words for how a character looks. We have no glimpse into Lenny as a person, his likes, dislikes, maybe his past experiences. This compared to the John Betrain description is totally different because we're looking at just the descriptive words of this character. This is more along the lines of maybe what you need to be working on at this point, just describing the character or characters in your narrative, whatever your visual narrative is going to end up being. This is probably a good place to start for that. So let's look at some tips for designing your characters. So let's say you've already written your story. You have a general idea of what your characters are about, but you have never drawn your character yet. You've never sat down and sketched out what that character is going to look like. So we look at these steps. Step one, think about who your character is aimed at, so what your audience is, so what type of story or narrative you're telling. Step two, decide how your character should appear based on your story. Now this is important because if you have a protagonist versus an antagonist, then you see that an antagonist may be drawn differently than the protagonist. The antagonist is usually a villain, and often is drawn to represent the characteristics that a villain has. I will go ahead now. We're going to look at step 3. Research other designs related to your character and based on your story. This can help a lot too. If you have a hero, if you have an antagonist or protagonist or villain that is related to maybe a story or narrative that you've already read or you enjoy, that will help you in understanding what or how to depict that emotion in your character. Step 4, make your character distinctive. This is important. It's okay to be influenced and motivated by other people's work, but try to make your characters distinctive in how they look. And we're not talking about, your characters can be really simple, and that's okay to do. It doesn't have to be elaborate. If simple and distinctive is better than elaborate and mundane. Elaborate and similar to other people's works out there, the more distinctive the better. Step 5 is use line qualities and styles to design your characters. So that sort of connects a little bit with step 4. Just make a character interesting to look at. Step 6, use exaggerated characteristics if appropriate. So that means, if you refer back to earlier, the reference we had of John Betrain, the young soldier versus maybe the mentally challenged or depressed character, how you imagine those two characters looking side by side should be totally different. So we have step 7, choose colors carefully. This is important. Remember earlier when I was talking about Moby from the example that I gave, Um, it was just a bit ago where we were talking about Moby having a red shirt when he's angry. So the red sort of helps to enhance that emotion in that character. All right, so step 8 is add accessories if appropriate. This comes into play if maybe a character has a teddy bear they hold around and carry if they're young, and if it's a story about maybe a character who's um, perhaps has a sidekick or something, or some sort of an accessory that they have that will help add to the story. Step 9 is know your character from all perspectives. This is something we're going to look at a little bit later. All this means is that you should be able to draw your character from behind, from the side, from looking up, from looking down, looking front, straight on at your character. You should know what your character looks like just as much as you know characteristics about your character's personality. And then step 10 is give your character personality. So however the character relates to other characters in the story, their personality should be shown through how you depict them. And these are all just very, very important aspects in creating a character. So let's look at, for an example, a couple examples of work here, and then we'll draw one. So here's a description of a character. It's a white bunny designed for the pirate ship Bed Trip. This is a book that I worked on for Nancy Quackenbush in Hidden Wolf Books, St. Augustine, Florida. The design of the character is pretty simple. It's a white bunny. Should have big floppy ears. Wears an eye patch that's black. Wears a red bandana around his head. Small black eyes. Small features on the face. Cute and lovable. If I were to ask you to take these characteristics and draw a bunny, you should be able to come up with something. Now this is what I came up with. This is something that it's a little hard to see maybe on your screen, but the bunny that I came up with had long arms. It was a floppy bunny, a toy bunny. I can show you here a little more about how I came up with the character. So I designed the character to have long ears, just as the publisher requested. So we have these long floppy ears sort of hang about and around the character. That was the first part. The head has a red bandana, so I wanted to be sure and include that. It has these spots on it. So I have the red bandana. Had small little eyes for the bunny, small black eyes, so I included that. Small features for the nose, so she didn't want it to be too much on the features. And then, of course, the bunny is a toy bunny, so it has really, really loose, floppy arms that sort of hang around. It's not going to be too animated itself because of this. And then long floppy legs, of course, because the little boy carries this around in the story. So in designing this, it's off those characteristics. I came up with something similar to this. So you may have done something totally different though. Your design for this could be something that is completely different than mine. The eye patch. How could I forget the eye patch on the bunny? So coming down here, we have an eye patch the little bunny wears. And this is close to what I came up with for the final design of the character. So let's look at a murderer description. Now this is a standalone piece, so if you're designing a standalone piece of art, you could do a diptych or a triptych. That's fine too. We talked about that at some point at a school where students were thinking about doing a 3 standalone pieces together for a sequential piece. That's perfectly fine too. Look at this. This is an actual piece of work. It's called Benton Ballad of the Jealous Lover. This is a standalone piece of art. And here's the descriptions. Now, this is the overall description of the painting. Now, let me be really clear. There's 2 descriptions that we're going to look at. The first deals with the overall description of the painting. Okay? Let's take a look at the painting first. This is the painting we're going to be looking at. Okay? Now we're going to be describing what we're seeing. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're describing what we're seeing. All right, so we start out with the setting is outside for the entire piece. There's a house in the background. There's also a cow in the background too. We missed that one, and a haystack. But there's the hills are rolling and swirling hills. A large tree in the left of the painting by the road. There's a woman and man in top left. Man is holding a knife, woman is beneath him. The road twists and turns towards and past the home in upper left. Men are sitting at a table in the bottom right. Two of them are playing music. One is listening. A bottle of whiskey or moonshine near them. Cups on the table. Now this is an overall description of the painting. What we're going to do now is we're going to break down just the character, just the murderer. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at this. Now, this is a painting by Thomas Hart. It's the Benton Ballad of the Jealous Lover of Lone Green Valley. We're going to be describing the murderer. This man, if I can pull it up, here, the murderer with the knife, okay? Let's describe him. He should be tall, lanky, towering over a woman. Should have long fingers, hands, holding a knife, long legs, wearing deep blue jeans, I should say dark blue jeans. Arms should be long, bending, moving forward, wearing a hat, an old fedora, and face should be menacing and grimacing. Okay, so we look at this now and compare it to what we just described. He has his black fedora, his face is grimaced, he has his blue jeans on, his boots, his hand is holding these long fingers holding this knife. And we could even went more descriptions with him. We left out the boots and a few more things. But overall, the generalization of what we're trying to work towards, we can see what this character should look like. So you should be able to describe your characters just the same. You should be able to break it down and tell me, what does the character look like? Let's try this again. This time with a zombie character. This is a relic hunter, is the name of the character. So here's the appearance. And what we're going to do is actually try to work on this together. Okay. He has greenish skin. Okay, he's wearing a brown fedora, brown jacket, and a brown satchel around his body. Satchel may be carrying an artifact. Something's in his satchel. Both eyes are large, wide, circular, and yellow. Light blue pants, dirty with brown boots. Brown mustache and some hair under his bottom lip. His mouth should be open, looking hungry. Stumbling always, hard to keep balance. This is our description. Now, we should be able to pull this together and draw a character based on just what we're seeing. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out actually placing, what I like to use is a circle method, and a lot of artists don't really like the circle method, and that's okay. If you prefer to do this another way, that's fine, okay? The first thing we're going to start out with, though, is the head. So I draw a circle represent the zombie's head. I'll go ahead and do this in red like I did earlier to kind of help break the two distinctions of the colors. So I have the red here to represent the zombie's head. I'll put the chin down here. Now remember, it has big eyes, so we're going to draw some big circles for the zombie's eyes here and here. Okay. The nose, the nostrils should be here. Has a mustache. Remember that. Want to be include the mustache in there. There's where the mustache will be. So I'm just working on the head right now. The neck will come down just below here. Now it says by description says that he's wearing a fedora, which is an old hat. So we'll put this on here. The hat coming back on each side like this, and I'll place it right on top of his head here. So it comes up both sides. We have the fedora here. All right, so it's just an old hat. This relic hunter zombie's wearing. The band going across, we'll include that in a bit. His eyes, just small little pupils here. Put another one up here, sort of offset, so they're not looking both in the same direction. Put a little bit of some lines under the eyes here. His mouth is open, based on the description, so we'll draw some teeth in here. And his chin coming down, back up, put another tooth here. And he has a little bit of hair, based on the description, underneath his chin. Now, he's wearing an old jacket, so we'll go ahead and include that. Here's where I use the circle method more for the arms. This will be where the hand is, one of the hands. He's wearing a satchel, so we'll go ahead and include that here. coming around the back. So here's his satchel. Inside of it is something. We can't really tell what it is. So the satchel will be coming down here. Just like that. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and work on how the body is positioned. Stumbling, remember that the character is stumbling. Hard to keep the balance, his balance. Another circle here to represent this hand. So I want to know where the arms are. Okay, one of the legs is going to be positioned just like this, and this will be the first foot. Okay, and the second foot is going to be, this leg is going to be bent inward just a little bit. Stumbling, remember we want to give the emphasis this character is having a hard time walking. Okay, so now that I have this rough sketch here, I can go back and start working on some details, such as with the hand. So I want to draw his fingers sort of sticking out a little bit. Okay, he's sort of just grabbing for whatever he can. That's good for this hand. This arm comes down and bends. And we'll draw the thumb first over here. Of course, his fingers here. Now, this method that I've just used is great for planning out where you're going to be drawing certain aspects of your drawing. But then once you have it, though, you have to go back and finish it up. So even though you've drawn it out in this mock-up underneath this planning process here, you have to go back and finish your work. So that's what we're going to work on now. We're going to go back with pencil. Now the character has these big eyes. Be sure and include those. You could do this portion in ink if you wanted. Nostril. There's his mustache. His mouth. Remember that the description said his mouth was open. You want to be sure and show that. A little bit of hair underneath the chin. His teeth. Get a couple of teeth here. 2 or 3 or 4. His tongue. If you did this in ink, you could allow the ink to dry and then go back and erase. So you could really pull out some detail. Now we're going to put back of his head here. Another eye, of course. Part of his cheek here. One pupil looking up this way, one that way. His fedora, you can start to add now some cuts out of the fabric of the fedora to make it look older. You can actually go beyond the lines you've drawn and add some more character to your lines this way. Drawing this it's an underdrawing to what it is you're trying to do really helps. Really helps me. Of course, he's got his satchel on. Comes down like this. His jacket here. This arm comes down, out. Draw this hand with the fingers. You're just really tracing over your lines at this point. But you've designed this character based on the description that we were given. And that's the most important thing we're pulling from this. We're going to have some tutorials later on how to draw, how to apply a certain medium, and so that's going to be really fun later on in the course. This is not necessarily a drawing technique. This is just to show you how the character can be designed based off a description. That's all this is. So just take that from it. Remember that you're designing your character, so you know more about your character than anyone else. So the good part is that you're not having to draw based on someone else's design, which is what the job of an illustrator is all the time. That's all that I do, is try to put on paper what someone who maybe doesn't like to draw or can't draw, or what they want or see in their mind. An illustrator's job is to do that, is to draw what they see in their mind. So it's really hard sometimes to depict what a person wants to see They know what they want, but sometimes it's hard for them to describe what it is they want. So here's our little zombie relic hunter. So it worked out okay. I don't know if you can see it as well as I hoped here. If I can try to pull this up, you can see a little bit better. The glare on the camera is, there we go. It's a little much. So our zombie relic hunter, based off the description we were given, and this is what I came up with. You know, you may have done something different for that. Okay. Now let's take a look a little bit about dealing with Photoshop. Now, those of you planning or doing a digital piece, you're at a huge advantage, and I've said this all along throughout the course, because I love layers. So what you could do for this is you select a layer that's near the bottom of the white canvas that you have already put on, and then you start to sketch out your whatever it is that you're designing. Let's just use the zombie hunter as a reference here. So you start to design, draw out the character using circles and ovals and whatever else that you may want to use. And while you're designing this, you have the opportunity, of course, to turn on and off these layers. And what that does is help you to see your under drawing better. So you could add all sorts of layers if you wanted onto your drawing to see maybe what a character would look like from different perspectives, what this leg might look like if it was bent inward versus outward, so on and so forth. So this is just the basic shape of the zombie hunter that we just created, or zombie relic hunter, there we go, that we just created. It's just a basic drawing of that, because what we want to do is we want to go back here in a second and start to change our layers around more to see what it is we come up with. So now we have, this is our under drawing. If we start to select a new layer and then maybe pull in a different color for our lines, we can then start to go back over top of this and add a little bit more to it. So you can see how that works. This really helps in designing. You can move things around if you do it like this. I'll show you an example of that right now. So if you were to create that layer, you can go back and maybe reposition it, maybe a little taller, maybe you want this a little shorter. So using digital is that you are at an advantage. Paper, we can pull this off with paper. It does take a little bit more time, but it is possible to pull these things off with paper. But if you're using digital, you can always play with the layers and see where it is you want to place something. Maybe if this head was off to the left a little bit, you can readjust for it and move it inward. There's all sorts of planning things you can do with digital. Another thing that you can do with digital is you can go ahead and ink your drawing. You can go ahead and put the black lines over the top of it, start to fill it out more. This helps you a lot because you can play around with maybe where the eyes are positioned. So if you don't necessarily like how it is with paper, you can always erase, of course. But the speed at which you can design with digital is amazing. You can play around with all sorts of different angles, perspectives, using digital. So you're able to do something that really artists working traditionally have a hard time doing. You can enlarge the shape of the hat more. All sorts of things you could do digitally that you can't do with pen and ink or paper. I love working digitally. I think it's really fun. But of course, you know, having that feel of paper and having the texture and just everything that paper has that it offers, or I shouldn't say paper, I should say you know, traditional, maybe is a better way to put it. Everything that traditional art has to offer, really just, I love it. I love to work in the mediums that are physical, that I can touch and feel. Working digitally is awesome though for design. You know, you have to use mediums in different ways for different artists. So some artists may use digital just for designing. That's designing alone. And some artists may use digital to create their entire piece from, which is fine. Digital art's is beautiful. So whatever you use it for is up to you. It's different for every artist. But in terms of character design and planning, you can't beat the ability to just change layers, move things around more, see how things work against one another, to play around with perspective, your composition, all of these things. You can do all this with digital so much easier than you can with traditional applications of your medium. It's just amazing. So play around with things, see what happens. You yourself can know what your characters should look like and what you want your characters to look like. Um, but so with this particular piece, when I go back, I can actually change and start to play around now with maybe what I would like for colors to look like. So I can move this layer below down here, and I can say, well, let's see how green works. That's pretty good. What about a little yellow in here too? On top of that, and you get to play around now with color. And we're not really focusing in on color right now. Like I said, that's going to come a little bit later. But it's so fun with digital because you can really access all these different attempts with your drawing, attempts that you may not end up using, attempts that may just be something you have in your mind and you want to see how it looks. And the coolest thing about it is you don't mess up your paper. You can just simply turn off your layer. And you can try this in all sorts of different color in all sorts of different ways. Okay, so that's it. So character design is something that, as we've seen now, can play a very important role in your overall design of your work. Whether it's a standalone piece of art or if it's sequential pieces, a comic book, children's book, graphic novel, character design is vital. Knowing what your character will look like, knowing what your character will appear as, is important before you ever start laying any type of medium down on canvas or paper. It's your absolute discretion on how you want to go about creating your characters and what emotions you want to convey by how you depict your characters. But if you sit down and just try to work it out on the whim, you may be very disappointed in the overall theme of your book or your work or your standalone piece. So thanks again. I hope you've enjoyed this particular unit. We'll move forward on in now to Unit 4 of Section 2. Please be sure to leave attachments of your work, images, take a snapshot, a quick shot from your phone, upload that to the Holler as you submit assignments. I'd love to see progress and see how you're doing within the course. Your instructor would love to see that as well, so be sure and attach any type of documentation of what you're doing to your submissions on the Holler. Well, thanks again. Until next time, I'm Christopher Eplin, and we'll just keep moving along within graphic arts. Thanks again.